The day my pack killed me, the sky didn't weep. No thunder cracked. The world was silent, as if holding its breath, waiting to see if they would go through with it. I was only 10 years old. My name was Ilara, at least it used to be. In the Silver Fang pack, I was just the orphan, the one who swept floors, who ate scraps, who slept in the cold corner of the servants' hall. My parents died defending this pack, and in return, the pack forgot I existed, until they needed me to die. The warning bells tore through the dawn. My heart, small and frantic like a trapped bird, beat against my ribs. I knew with a chilling certainty that stole the air from my lungs that the bells were for me. Elder Morwen stood in the doorway, her face carved from winter stone. "Ilara," she said, and my name in her mouth sounded like a sentence. "Come, you have been chosen." Chosen? The word was a lie, wrapped in ceremony and dread. 2 warriors, their grips like iron, dragged me from my thin mattress. I didn't scream. Orphans learn early that screaming only brings more pain. I kicked, a feeble struggle against a fate already sealed. They marched me through the pack house, a parade of shame. Wolves watched from shadowed doorways. Some turned their faces away. Others stared with empty eyes. Not one spoke. Not one stepped forward. In their silence, I heard my death warrant signed. The grand hall was a cavern of judgment. Alpha Brahm, a mountain of a man with ice in his gaze, sat upon his throne of carved oak, and beside him, Kale, the Alpha's son, 16 years old, with eyes the color of a stormy sky, and a kindness that had once saved me from freezing. He was the only one who ever saw me. Now his face was pale, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. "Father, this is madness," Kale's voice, usually so steady, cracked with desperation. "She's a child. There has to be another way." "The seers have spoken, Kale." Alpha Brahm's voice was final, a door slamming shut. "The blight that withers our crops and steals the breath from our warriors is a curse, an ancient malice. Only the sacrifice of an Omega child, orphaned and pure, will break it. Her life for hundreds. It is not murder, it is arithmetic." "She has a name," Kale shouted, and the hall flinched. "She is Ilara. She collects river stones because she thinks they're pretty. She hums old lullabies to the pups when they're scared. She is not a number." His words were a balm and a torture. He saw me. He remembered. Tears, hot and shameful, finally spilled down my cheeks. Alpha Brahm's gaze swept over me, dismissing my entire existence. She is weak, unclaimed, expendable, the perfect offering to appease the old gods. Take her to the cleansing chamber. We ascend the mountain at midnight. As the warriors pulled me away, my eyes locked with Kale's. His were filled with a raging, helpless storm. "I'm sorry," he mouthed, the words a ghost on his lips. "I'm so sorry." His apology followed me into the dark, cold preparation room. It echoed in my mind as Elder Morwen and her attendants stripped me of my ragged dress and clothed me in a fine white linen, a shroud for the living. They painted symbols on my skin with ash and bound my wrists with rough rope that bit into my flesh. "Why?" I whispered, my voice a dry leaf. "What did I do?" Elder Morwen's hands stilled for a moment. "You did nothing wrong, child. You were simply born in the wrong place, at the wrong time, to the wrong parents. Your death will be remembered as a noble act, a gift to the pack." "I don't want to be a gift," I cried, the dam breaking. "I want to live. I want to grow up. I want someone to to love me. For a fleeting second, something like regret flickered in her ancient eyes. Then it was gone, extinguished by duty. The moon goddess will love you, she said, but it was no comfort. In her arms, you will find the peace this world denied you. Midnight came like a thief. The procession was a silent, snaking line of torches up the sacred mountain path. The entire pack followed, a silent audience to my execution. My bare feet were cut and bleeding, the cold stones seeping into my bones. Halfway up, a commotion. Kale fought his way to the front, his chest heaving. "Stop, please! We haven't tried everything." Alpha Brahm turned, his patience shattered. He struck Kale, a brutal backhand that sent his son sprawling to the ground. The sound of the impact was worse than any curse. "You will learn, boy, that sentiment is a luxury an alpha cannot afford. Her life for the many, that is the first, hardest lesson. Now move or be restrained." Kale rose, blood trickling from his split lip. Our eyes met again, and in his I saw the death of hope. He had tried, he truly had tried, and he had failed. We both had. The summit was a barren circle of stone under a cold, full moon. The altar sat in the center, a dark slab stained with the history of other noble acts. The warriors lifted me onto it. The stone was so cold it burned. They fastened the ropes to iron rings, stretching my arms above my head. I was spread out like an offering, because that's what I was. Panic, pure and primal, finally took over. I pulled against the ropes, my small body straining. "Mama!" I sobbed, the word torn from a place deeper than memory. "Mama, please! I'm scared! I don't want to die!" But my mother was gone, had been gone for years. I was utterly, completely alone. Elder Morwen's chanting rose to a dissonant melody in the thin mountain air. Alpha Brahm stepped forward, the ceremonial knife in his hand. Moonlight danced along the silver blade, making it look alive, hungry. "Wait!" Kale's voice was ragged. He stumbled forward. "Let me say goodbye. Please, Father, 1 minute." A curt nod. Kale knelt beside the altar, his face level with mine. He was crying. "I'm sorry, Ilara. I tried. I swear on my life I tried." "I know," I whispered, a strange calm settling over me. This was it. "You were kind. That's more than anyone else was. Thank you." "You deserve so much more," he choked out. "You deserve a life. You deserve everything. And I failed you." "You saw me," I said. "That matters. You matter." He reached out, his trembling fingers brushing a tear from my cheek. It was the gentlest touch I had ever known, a tiny spark of warmth in the vast, consuming cold. "Time," Alpha Brahm boomed. Kale was pulled away, his expression of utter devastation. Elder Morwen's chanting reached a fever pitch. Alpha Brahm raised the knife high, the moon glinting off its point. I closed my eyes. I didn't feel the blade go in, not at first. There was a pressure, immense and wrong, in the center of my chest. Then a tearing, a searing cold that blossomed into agony so profound it erased the world. My heart stuttered, fought, and stopped. The last thing I heard wasn't the pack's relieved sigh. It wasn't my own fading breath. It was a voice that was not a voice, but the sound of silver light, an ancient fury. It vibrated through the stone, through my vanishing spirit, through the very fabric of the night. "What have you done?" Then there was only light, a furious, beautiful, all-consuming silver light, and I was gone. Death was not an end. It was a beginning in a place that defied beginnings. I awoke on a field of silver grass that glowed with its own soft light. Above, stars swirled in impossible constellations, and a moon, huge and impossibly close, hung in a sky that was both midnight and dawn. The air hummed with a power that was old and gentle and terrifying all at once. "Hello, little one." She stood before me, and I knew her instantly. Stories were carved into the walls of our pack hall, whispered around fires. The moon goddess. She was tall, ethereal, her hair a cascade of starlight, her eyes holding the depth of the eternal night. She was beauty and power, and a sadness so vast it made my own grief feel small. "Am I dead?" My voice sounded strange here, clearer. "Yes," she said, her tone melodic yet grave. "Your mortal body died on that stone, your heart ceased, but your spirit I caught before it could fade. What they did to you was an abomination, a perversion of everything I hold sacred." I looked down at my hands. They were solid. I wore the white gown, but it was clean, unstained. I touched my chest. No wound. "The curse," they said. There was no curse. The words were not loud, but they shook the silver grass like a gale. The goddess's form flickered with contained rage. The blight was a poison, a slow sickness in the earth from a buried metal their miners had disturbed. It could have been healed with time, with care, with knowledge. But your alpha was impatient. Your seers were arrogant. They wanted a simple solution, a grand gesture to cement their power. So they twisted old tales and called murder mercy. They sacrificed the innocent to hide their own failures. The truth was a different kind of knife. It carved out the last bit of childlike faith I had left. I died for a lie. I died because I was convenient. The sobs that racked me then were silent, dry heaves of pure despair. The goddess knelt, her presence enveloping me like a shield. "I am so sorry, Alara. You should never have known such betrayal." "Why am I here?" I managed to ask. "Why not just let me go?" "Because I offer you a choice," she said, her light softening. "I can give you peace, true eternal rest, no more pain, no loneliness, no cold. You would sleep in my light, loved and cherished for all time. Many choose this path, and after what you have endured, you have more than earned it." It sounded like a dream, the end of hunger, of fear, of being nobody. Or, the word left my lips before I could stop it. A faint, proud smile touched her lips. "Or, you can return, changed, forged in my light. You can go back to the pack that discarded you, not as a victim, but as a force of justice and renewal. You can become the Luna Queen the wolf world has forgotten it needs. You can ensure no other child suffers your fate." Return. The thought sent a bolt of terror through me. Back to the cold stones, the empty eyes, the memory of the knife. The boy, Kale, he tried. The goddess's expression deepened with sorrow. "He is drowning, Alara. His guilt is an ocean, and he has been sinking in it for every day since you died. He visits your grave, a bare patch of earth they gave you, and begs forgiveness from a stone. He believes his failure is absolute. His heart is closed to all others, trapped in that moment on the mountain." Kale's broken face filled my mind. His kindness didn't deserve such eternal punishment. "If I return, what would I be?" "You would be my vessel, my voice. I would train you, teach you the old ways of balance, of power tempered with compassion. You would learn to command, to heal, to see truth, to wield authority that comes not from dominance, but from divinity. She tilted my chin up. You would have the strength to break the cycle of cruelty, but the choice must be yours. It is your life, your second chance. I looked out at the impossible landscape. Peace or purpose, a soft end or a painful, difficult new beginning. How long? I asked. She said, 7 years. 7 years here, learning, growing strong. You would return at 17, a woman, a queen, ready to face your past. 7 years away from everything I had ever known. But what had that world ever given me but neglect and a bloody altar? I thought of Kale, haunted. I thought of the other orphans in the servants' hall, their hollow eyes. I thought of the system that deemed some lives worth less than others. I don't want to become like them. My voice was small but firm. If I go back, I don't want to rule through fear. I don't want to hurt people just because I can. The goddess pulled me into an embrace. It was like being held by moonlight itself, warm, safe, unconditional. Oh, my brave child, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. That is precisely why I chose you. Your heart, even broken, knows the difference. I will teach you power, yes, but I will teach you wisdom first, mercy before might. You will not be a tyrant. You will be a healer, queen. I made my choice. It wasn't for revenge. It was for the boy who tried to save me. It was for the next Ilara waiting in the shadows. I'll go back. Train me. The goddess's smile was like the dawn breaking over the silver fields. Then rise, Ilara. Your first lesson begins now. Time in the goddess's realm was a river that flowed in all directions at once. 7 years passed, yet each day felt both endless and fleeting. Under her guidance, the frightened, broken child began to fade, replaced by someone new, someone being forged in moonlight and purpose. My first lessons were not of power, but of history. True history, not the victor's tale my pack told. As we walked through meadows and glowing flowers, she began. Long ago, alphas and lunas ruled together, not as master and subordinate, but as partners. The alpha embodied strength, protection, the outward force of the pack. The luna embodied wisdom, intuition, healing, the inward soul. One could not function without the other. It was balance. She showed me visions like memories painted on the air. I saw mighty she-wolves with eyes like mine, glowing with inner light, standing beside their alphas, mediating disputes with a word, healing wounds with a touch, their authority woven from compassion as much as command. Then came the age of shadow, she continued, her voice turning grim. A time of great wars. Lunas, who fought with spirit and insight, began to fall in battle. In their grief and fear, alphas began to hoard power. They told themselves it was for efficiency, for survival. They forgot that strength without a moral compass is just brutality. As the 7th year drew to a close, I was no longer a child. I stood tall, my bearing of quiet authority. My once mousy brown hair was streaked with permanent silver, and my eyes held the constant, gentle glow of the divine. I could command the very light around me, sense a falsehood from a mile away, and my wolf was a majestic companion of immense spiritual power. The goddess summoned me to the heart of her realm, where the giant moon seemed to kiss the ground. A pool of pure, radiant energy shimmered before us. "It is time, my daughter," she said, and the endearment made my heart swell. "You are ready." A flutter of fear, quickly mastered. Will they listen? Some will, some will not. You have the tools to deal with both. Remember, you were not returning to conquer, but to heal, to show them the balance they have lost. She placed her hand over my heart. A torrent of pure, divine power flooded into me, settling in my core, a well of limitless, gentle strength. My blessing is yours, the authority of the Luna Queen, the power to heal, to command, to judge. Immortality, should you choose it. Use it wisely. Use it justly. The weight of it was immense, but not crushing. It felt right, like a key fitting into a long-locked door. "And Kale?" I asked, the old concern surfacing. Her smile was knowing. "He awaits you. His pain is your first test of healing. Now, go." She gestured to the pool. I took a deep breath, my 7 years of training solidifying into resolve. I stepped into the liquid light. It was not falling. It was being pulled, gently but irresistibly, through layers of reality. The silver fields blurred, replaced by a rushing darkness, then the sharp scent of pine and cold stone. My feet touched solid ground. The divine warmth receded, replaced by the biting chill of a mountain night. I stood on the sacred summit. The altar was still there. The stains were still there. But I was not. I was Alara no longer. I was the Luna Queen, and I was home. Kale's world had narrowed to a simple, painful routine for 7 years. Wake, lead, grieve, sleep, repeat. The guilt was a stone lodged in his chest, heavier than his alpha title. He stood at her grave, a small, neglected plot at the mountain's base. They hadn't even buried her on the summit, too sacred for a sacrificed Omega. The irony was a bitter taste he could never spit out. "You'd be 17 today," he whispered to the unmarked stone. The wind snatched his words away, as it always did. "You'd have found your wolf. You'd have lived." The truth about the curse had come out months after her death. A poisoned water vein from the old silver mine, curable, treatable. His father, Alpha Brahm, had crumbled under the weight of his own monstrous error, his heart giving out 2 years later, some said, from the goddess's judgment. Kale inherited a pack drowning in shame and a legacy of blood. He never took a mate. The elders hounded him, but the idea was unthinkable. How could he bond with another when the only heart his wolf had ever called to was buried under 3 feet of cold earth? Alara's memory was a ghost that walked beside him every moment. He was about to turn away when the wind shifted. It carried a scent that froze his blood in his veins. Power, ancient, clean, and terrifying, and underneath it, moonlight, wildflowers, and a whisper of something achingly familiar, something gone for 7 years. His wolf surged to the surface with a force that nearly brought him to his knees. "Mate!" it howled in his mind, a sound of pure, confused agony. Mate is here. Impossible. His mate was dead. His wolf had to be wrong, broken by grief. He turned, slowly, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. A figure stood at the crest of the sacred path, silhouetted by the rising moon. Female, slender. She began to descend, moving with an unnatural grace, as if she glided over the stones. As she stepped into a pool of moonlight, Kale's breath vanished. It was her. It wasn't her. The face was Alara's, but older, refined by time and something else. Her hair, once plain brown, was shot through with luminous silver streaks, and her eyes glowed with a soft, ethereal blue light, and she was surrounded by a faint silver nimbus, like captured moonlight. She stopped a few paces away. The scent of divine power and wildflowers washed over him, and the mate bond, dormant and silent for a decade, slammed into his consciousness with the force of a thunderclap. It was a physical shock, a cord of pure energy snapping taut between their souls. He gasped, staggering back a step. "Hello, Kale." Her voice. It was Alara's voice, the one from his memories, but layered with an authority that made his alpha instincts want to bow, to submit, to protect all at once. "You're dead," he choked out, the words a raw scrape in his throat. "I buried you. I felt your heart stop." The memories, never far, surged up. her small, cold body in his arms, the horrible, final stillness. "I died," she agreed, her tone calm, factual. "7 years ago, on that altar, your father murdered me for a lie, but the moon goddess disagreed with the sentence." She took a step closer. He could see the details now, the elegant lines of her face, the quiet confidence in her posture. This was no ghost. This was flesh and blood, thrumming with a life more vibrant than anything he'd ever felt. "She brought me back, trained me, forged me into what your pack needs, what the world needs." Her glowing eyes held his. "I've returned to fulfill a promise." "What promise?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "That my death wouldn't be the end, that I'd come back, and that I'd show every wolf in Silverfang what they truly threw away when they killed a frightened little girl." The words were not spoken with venom, but with a profound, devastating sorrow. They hit Cale more force than his father's punch ever had. Are you a spirit? An illusion?" "Touch me," she said simply, extending a hand. Hesitantly, driven by a need stronger than fear or reason, he reached out. His fingers brushed hers. The contact was an electric storm. The mate bond roared to full, blinding life, singing of completion, of a missing piece finally found. It was joy, so sharp it was pain. Relief, so profound it was agony. He felt her, not just her skin, but the echo of her terror, the strength of her will, the vast, gentle power simmering beneath the surface. It was undeniably, irrevocably her. He jerked his hand back as if burned, falling to his knee, not in submission, but from the sheer, overwhelming force of it all. You're my mate," he gasped. "But you were a child. I shouldn't have. The bond." "I was too young to feel it then," she said, her voice softening. "But you weren't. A part of your soul recognized mine. Why else would you have fought so hard? Why else has this haunted you for 7 years?" Tears, hot and shameful, streamed down Cale's face. The dam holding back 7 years of grief and guilt shattered. "Because I loved you," he wept, the confession torn from the deepest, most guarded part of him. "Even then, in my clumsy, boyish way, I loved you. You were good and kind, and the world was so dark to you, and I wanted to make it right, and I failed. I watched you die, and I failed." She knelt before him, so they were eye level. The glow from her illuminated his tear-streaked face. She reached out and gently wiped a tear away. Her touch was warm, real, alive. "You didn't fail me, Cale," she said, her own eyes shimmering. "You were a boy facing an alpha, a father, and 500 years of toxic tradition. You tried. You stood up. You said goodbye. In my last moments of terror, your kindness was the only light I had. That mattered. It has always mattered."
"But you still died," he cried, the old wound ripped open. "You still felt the knife. You still called for your mother." "Yes," she said, and for the first time, a flicker of that old pain showed in her divine eyes. "I died, and it was the most terrifying, lonely, painful experience of my existence. But Cale, listen to me. If you had somehow stopped it that night, you would have been killed or exiled. Your father would have simply found another nobody to slaughter. The sickness in the pack would have remained. Sometimes," she placed her hand over his heart, "we have to lose a battle to win the war. You lost that night, but because you lost, because my death broke something in you, you became the alpha who can help me fix it. An alpha who values mercy, an alpha who understands that true strength protects the weak." Her words were a balm and a key, turning the lock on a cage he'd lived in for years. He hadn't just failed, he had been set up for a different kind of victory. "What are you?" he asked again, awestruck. "I am the Luna Queen," she said, and the title rang with truth in the silent night. Divine authority returned. The balance your people lost. I am here for justice, for change, for every orphan who's been forgotten. She stood, offering her hand again. "Now come with me. back to the pack house. It's time they learned that murder has consequences, even when the victim was just a girl nobody loved. He looked at her hand, then up at her face, the face of the ghost who had haunted him, now made flesh, made divine, made his. "They'll try to hurt you," he said, the alpha in him surfacing through the storm of emotion. "Elder Morwen, the council, they won't accept this." A small, dangerous smile touched her lips. "They don't have a choice. Now, Kale, are you with me, or are you still your father's son?" There was no choice. There had never been a choice, not since the day he first sneaked an extra bread roll to a hungry little girl with sad eyes. He took her hand, the mate bond singing between them. "I'm with you," he said, his voice firm for the first time in years. "I should have been with you 7 years ago. I won't make that mistake again." Her smile then was like the sun breaking through a lifetime of clouds. "Good, because I'm going to need an alpha who remembers that strength is for protecting the vulnerable. And you," she squeezed his hand, "have proven you understand that better than anyone." Together, hand in hand, they turned and walked down the mountain toward the sleeping pack. The ghost was no longer a memory, she was a queen, and Kale's world, once colored only in shades of gray and grief, was suddenly, terrifyingly, brilliantly alive. The Silver Fang pack house slept, a dark silhouette against the starry sky. Inside, 500 wolves dreamed, unaware that their past had just walked down the mountain hand in hand with their future. Kale stopped at the edge of the training grounds, his alpha senses reaching out through the pack bonds. He took a deep breath, gathering his will. This was not a request, it was a summons from the deepest place of his authority. Great Hall, now, every wolf, no exceptions. The command pulsed through the sleeping pack like a shock wave. Across the territory, wolves jolted awake. Lights flickered on in cabins. Confused murmurs grew into a wave of discontent as they stumbled from their beds, pulled by the irresistible alpha order. They filed into the great hall, a river of drowsy, irritated bodies in nightclothes and hastily donned tunics. The cavernous room, usually reserved for ceremonies and feasts, filled with the smell of sleep and brewing rebellion. Elder Morwen, ever vigilant, was among the first to arrive, her wrinkled face tight with disapproval. "Alpha Kale, what is the meaning of this? It's the dead of night. Has there been an attack?" Her shark eyes swept past him, and then she froze. Her gaze locked on the figure beside him. The blood drained from her face, leaving her parchment pale. Her hand flew to her throat. "No, it cannot be. You are a wraith, a trick of the light." Alara, no, the Luna Queen, stepped forward, just enough to be fully illuminated by the hall's torches. The faint silver glow around her seemed to brighten, casting long, dramatic shadows. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by panicked whispers. "Is that Alara, the sacrificed Omega? But she's dead. We saw her die." "My name was Alara," she said, and her voice, calm and clear, cut through the noise like a knife. It carried a weight, an authority that had nothing to do with volume. Every wolf felt it in their bones, a pressure in the air that demanded attention. "I was the orphaned Omega you led up the sacred mountain 7 years ago, the child you murdered on a stone altar to break a curse that never existed." The hall erupted, shouts of denial, cries of fear, the scraping of chairs as some tried to flee for the doors. Silence. The word was not shouted, it was commanded. It vibrated with a divine power that was absolute. Every mouth snapped shut, every body locked in place, muscles frozen mid-motion. The sudden quiet was deafening. Luna Command, a power lost to legend, now made terrifyingly real. The queen walked slowly into the center of the paralyzed crowd. Her glowing blue eyes swept over faces she remembered, warriors who had held her, mothers who had looked away, elders who had nodded in solemn approval. 7 years ago, she continued, her voice a chilling melody in the silent hall, you tied me down, you chanted prayers, you watched as your alpha plunged a knife into the heart of a 10-year-old girl. And as I died, you told yourselves it was noble, necessary, that one life for hundreds was a mercy. She stopped in front of Elder Morwen, who stood rigid, eyes wide with terror. There was no curse, Elder, was there? Her jaw worked, but no sound came out. The Queen's power held her fast. Answer me, and the compulsion was gentle, inexorable. I was afraid. The pack was sickening, dying. Alpha Brome demanded answers, a solution. The sickness was poison from the old mines, the Queen stated, the truth ringing like a bell. It could have been cured with herbs and clean water. It would have taken time, effort, resources, but that was inconvenient. So you, Elder, had a vision. You manufactured a prophecy. You offered a quick, brutal, sacrificial solution. You offered up the most expendable life you could find, mine. She turned her gaze back to the pack. You sacrificed a child for convenience. You called it divine will to hide your own fear and laziness. My death was not an act of faith, it was an act of cowardice. The truth, spoken with such calm, divine certainty, was a weapon that found its mark. In the frozen faces, Kale saw dawning horror, shame, the ugly past stripped of its noble lies. The moon goddess did not accept my offering. She caught my spirit, she healed me, she trained me, and she has sent me back with her authority to deliver justice and to demand change.
She released her command. Wolves stumbled, gasped, but no one spoke. The fear had been replaced by a deeper, more unsettling awe. "What do you want?" a warrior near the front dared to ask, his voice trembling. "Revenge? To kill us as we killed you?" The Queen's expression softened, but the power around her did not dim. "No, I want reform. I want the Elder Council dissolved and reformed to include Lunas and Omegas. I want laws, ironclad laws that protect every orphan, every vulnerable wolf in this pack. Laws that ensure no child ever goes hungry, works before their time, or is deemed expendable again. I want this pack to remember that the moon goddess values mercy above might and compassion above convenience." She looked at Kale, and her gaze held a challenge and an invitation. "And I will work alongside the Alpha who tried to save me, the one who has carried the weight of your collective sin on his shoulders for 7 years. Together we will rebuild Silverfang into something worthy of its name." Elder Morwen found her voice, thin and desperate. "You expect us to bow to a ghost? A girl with strange powers?" "I am no ghost," the Queen said. To demonstrate, she raised her hand. A sphere of pure silver light blossomed in her palm, humming with benevolent, terrifying energy. "I am the Moon Queen, chosen by the goddess herself. This power can heal the sick." The light pulsed warmly. "Or it can revoke the gift of the shift from those who abuse it." The light crackled, sharp and cold for an instant. "I can see the truth in your hearts. I can command your obedience. You can accept this new path gracefully and help me build a better pack, or you can resist and face divine judgment. The choice is yours." She let the sphere of light float upward, illuminating the entire hall in its ethereal glow. "But choose now. The age of shadows is over. The age of balance begins tonight." One by one, wolves began to kneel. First, the Omegas at the back, their faces streaked with tears of hope. Then the younger warriors, their rigid world views cracking under the weight of truth and raw power. Then families, pulling their children down with them. Finally, only Elder Morwen and a handful of Brom's oldest, most loyal captains remained standing.
They looked at Kale, seeking guidance, permission to fight. Kale met their eyes, then slowly, deliberately went to one knee before the Luna Queen. He bowed his head. "My queen," he said, the words clear and firm. "My mate, Silver Fang Pack is yours to command." It was the final blow. With a shuddering sigh, Elder Morwen collapsed to her knees, her proud head bowing. The last holdouts followed. The Luna Queen stood in the center of her kneeling pack, a silver figure of light and judgment. "Then rise," she said, her voice now holding a note of promise. "Rise, Silver Fang. Your past is written in blood and lies. Your future starts now. Let us write it in light and truth." As the pack rose, a murmur not of fear, but of something fragile and new, hope, began to fill the great hall. The girl they had killed was gone. In her place stood their queen, and the real work was just beginning. The dawn after the queen's return brought no peace to Silverfang territory. It brought a brittle, buzzing tension. The pack was divided into 3 clear factions, and the lines were drawn in the very air they breathed. The first and largest were the hopeful, the Omegas, the lower-ranking warriors with families, the young who chafed under the old, rigid ways. They looked upon the Luna Queen with awe. She was a living promise, proof that the forgotten could rise, that mercy had power. They whispered her name like a prayer, Selene. She had asked them to call her that, a new name for a new life, honoring the moon that saved her. To them, she was salvation. The second were the fearful, wolves who had participated in or supported the sacrifice, now drowning in a rising tide of guilt and terror. They jumped at shadows, avoided the luminous gaze of her eyes, and waited for the other divine shoe to drop. Would she call them out one by one? Would there be a purge? Their obedience was born of dread, not loyalty. The third were the resentful, a smaller, far more dangerous group. Elder Morwen's remaining allies, Brahm's old war captains, wolves whose status and power were built upon the very hierarchy the queen threatened to dismantle. They met in hushed conversations in the armory, the hunting lodges, anywhere away from the Alpha House and its new glowing resident. Kale felt it all through the pack bonds, a discordant symphony of hope, fear, and simmering anger. He stood with Selene on the balcony of the Alpha's quarters, now their quarters, watching the pack go about its morning routines. "They're afraid," Kale said quietly. "Good," Selene replied, her eyes scanning the territory with that unnerving, perceptive glow. "Fear of consequence is the beginning of respect for law, but it cannot be the end. We must give them something to believe in, not just something to fear." "The resentful won't be swayed by belief," Kale warned. "Rorik, my father's head captain, I can feel his fury. He believes you're an imposter, a witch who's enchanted me in the pack. He thinks the true way is strength alone." Selene was quiet for a moment. "Then we must show him a different kind of strength." Their first test came that afternoon. Kale had summoned the pack's head healer, Anya, a capable but overworked beta, to discuss converting a disused storage barn into a proper infirmary, a cornerstone of Selene's vision for pack care. As they examined the space, Rorik and 2 of his lieutenants appeared in the doorway, blocking the light. Rorik was a mountain of a man, scarred and grim, his loyalty to Brahm's memory a cold, hard thing in his chest. "Alpha," Rorik said, his tone just shy of disrespectful. He didn't acknowledge Selene. "The patrols need direction. The border watches are complaining of leniency. We're showing weakness to our neighbors." Kale straightened. "The patrols have their orders, Rorik. Maintain vigilance, but no aggression. We are not showing weakness. We are choosing not to provoke." "A fine line," Rorik grunted, "one our enemies won't appreciate. And this," he finally flicked his eyes towards Selene, his lip curling slightly, "infirmary. We are warriors, not nursemaids. Resources should go to weapons, to training, not to coddling the sick who cannot contribute. The air grew cold. Celine had been running her hand over a dusty windowsill, but now she turned. She didn't speak. She simply looked at Rorik. Her glowing eyes held his. It wasn't a challenge, not a glare. It was a seeing. Kale, through their budding mate bond, felt a ripple of her power, a gentle probe seeking the truth behind the bluster. Rorik shifted uncomfortably under her gaze, his bravado faltering for a second. "A strong pack is a healthy pack, Captain," Celine said, her voice soft yet carrying. "A warrior who dies from an infected scratch is a waste of training. A mother who dies in childbirth is a loss to the future. Strength is not just about claws and teeth. It is about resilience, about preserving life, not just taking it." "Preserving the life of the weak drains the strong," Rorik countered, rallying. "It is the natural order." "Is it?" Celine asked, taking a step forward. The silver light around her seemed to pulse. Was it the natural order to murder a child because she was weak, because she was an orphan? Tell me, Captain, does that order make us stronger, or does it make us monsters? Rorik flinched as if struck. The other wolves in the barn held their breath. He had no answer that wouldn't condemn himself or his dead alpha. "This infirmary will be built," Celine continued, the divine authority seeping back into her tone. "Healer Anya will have the supplies she needs. The old servants' quarters will be renovated into proper homes for our orphans. These are not requests, Captain Rorik. They are the first laws of the new Silverfang. You will comply, or you will be relieved of your duty." The threat hung in the dusty air. Relieved of duty was a polite term for exile for a wolf like Rorik. His face turned a mottled red. He looked to Kale, seeking support from his alpha. Kale met his eyes steadily, then slowly, deliberately, went to one knee before the Luna Queen. He bowed his head. "My queen," he said, the words clear and firm. "My mate, Silverfang Pack is yours to command." It was the final blow. With a shuddering sigh, Elder Morwen collapsed to her knees, her proud head bowing. The last holdouts followed. The Luna Queen stood in the center of her kneeling pack, a silver figure of light and judgment. "Then rise," she said, her voice now holding a note of promise. "Rise, Silver." It was a clear, unequivocal alliance. Alpha and Luna, united. Rorik's jaw worked. For a terrifying moment, Kale thought the captain might actually challenge them right there. But the sheer, combined weight of Kale's alpha aura and Celine's divine presence was too much. Rorik gave a curt, furious nod, turned on his heel, and stormed out, his lieutenant scrambling after him. When they were gone, the tension bled from the room. Healer Anya let out a shaky breath. "Thank you, my Luna. He has been blocking my requests for moons." Celine's shoulders slumped slightly, the mantle of command relaxing. "The resistance has a face now," she said to Kale, her voice low. "It will not end with him." "I know," Kale said, "but we faced him down, together. The pack saw it." "They saw a conflict," Celine corrected, turning back to the window, her gaze distant. "They need to see a victory, a reason to believe this new way works." She looked at Healer Anya. "There's a fever in the eastern cabins, the one you've struggled to treat?" Anya nodded. "A wasting fever. It doesn't respond to my usual herbs. 3 pups and an elder are very ill." A determined light sparked in Celine's eyes. "Take me to them." "Celine," Kale started, concern lacing his voice, "if you cannot heal it, it could be seen as a failure of your power." She turned her luminous gaze on him, and for a second he saw the ghost of the brave, desperate girl she had been. "Then I must not fail. This isn't about showing power, Kale. It's about showing care. They need to see their queen not just commanding, but kneeling. Come with me." An hour later, they stood in a cramped, smoky cabin in the poorest part of the territory. The air was thick with the smell of sickness and despair. A young mother, her face drawn with worry, hovered over a pallet where her 2 young pups lay listless, their skin hot to the touch. In the corner, an old wolf coughed weakly. The family recoiled at first at the sight of their glowing queen, fear in their eyes. Celine didn't approach the pups immediately. She went to the mother first. "What are their names?" she asked softly. The mother stammered, "Lyra and Finn, my Luna." "Beautiful names," Celine said, a genuine smile touching her lips. Then she knelt by the pallet, ignoring the dirt floor. She placed a hand on Lyra's forehead, closing her eyes. Kale felt the surge of her power through their bond, but it was a gentle, probing energy, not a blast of force. Her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's not a natural fever," she murmured after a moment. "There's a taint, a rot in the damp wood of this wall." She pointed to the far corner of the cabin, where the logs were dark with moisture. "A black mold grows there, invisible, poisoning the air." Healer Anya gasped. "I never thought to look." Celine placed both hands on Lyra's small chest. Silver light, soft as dawn, emanated from her palms and enveloped the little girl. It wasn't dramatic. It was a slow, gentle washing away. Lyra's labored breathing eased. The feverish flush began to fade from her cheeks. Within minutes, she sighed and fell into a deep, natural sleep. Celine repeated the process with Finn, then moved to the elder. With each healing, the silver light did its work, cleansing the mold's poison from their bodies. The elder's coughing subsided, and he looked at Celine with tears in his old eyes. When she was done, Celine arose, her glow slightly dimmed from the effort. She faced the mother. "The mold must be removed, the wall repaired. I will send warriors to help you do it today. Your family will be moved to a clean cabin until it is safe." The mother fell to her knees, weeping openly, clutching Celine's hand. "Thank you, my queen. Thank you. You saved them." Word spread through the pack like wildfire, not through proclamations, but through the weeping gratitude of a mother. The Luna Queen had walked into the poorest home, knelt in the dirt, and not just healed with impossible power, but found the cause. She had solved a mystery their own healer could not. That night, as Kale and Celine walked back to the Alpha House, the pack bonds hummed with a new emotion, one that had been in short supply for 7 years: gratitude. Be hopeful had their proof. The fearful saw mercy in action. The resentful, well, Rorik's fury would fester, but he was now fighting not just a rival, but a legend in the making. Celine leaned slightly against Kale, a rare show of weariness. "One cabin at a time," she whispered. He put his arm around her, the mate bond warm and steady between them. "One heart at a time," he agreed. They had won the day, but in the shadows, the whispers of rebellion were already plotting their next move. The battle for Silverfang's soul had truly begun. The victory in the sick cabin was a fragile bloom in a field of thorns. While the pack's heart began to soften toward their Luna Queen, its old entrenched bones ached with resistance. The rumors started subtly, a poison more insidious than any mold. Kale heard them first through his beta, Jarek, a loyal wolf with a keen ear for discontent. They came in fragments, whispered in the forge, muttered over hunting kills. "She heals, yes, but at what cost? That light, it's not natural. The goddess favors her, they say, but why would the goddess choose a weak Omega? Perhaps it's not the goddess at all. Rorik says the old ways kept us safe. Now we build nurseries while our borders grow thin. She hasn't aged a day since she returned. That's not a blessing, that's witchcraft." The most dangerous rumor, the one that slithered from Rorik's inner circle, was the most insidious. The Alpha is bewitched. His judgment is clouded by her magic. He is no longer his own wolf. It was a masterstroke. It attacked not just Celine, but Kale's authority, the very legitimacy of their rule. It planted a seed of doubt that could split the pack down the middle, loyalty to the Alpha versus fear of the unknown queen. Kale confronted Celine in their private chambers. "They're calling you a witch, saying you've ensnared my mind." Celine stood by the window, her silhouette framed by moonlight. She didn't look surprised. It was inevitable. When truth fails, fear-mongering begins. They cannot fight my power, so they seek to discredit its source. "We have to confront it," Kale said, frustration edging his voice. "Call a gathering. Deny it." "Denials are fuel for liars," Celine said, turning. Her glowing eyes were thoughtful. "They want a spectacle, a confrontation where Rorik can paint me as a threat. We must not play his game. We must change the board." "How?" A determined glint lit her eyes. "By proving my power serves the pack in a way they cannot ignore. By doing something so fundamentally, undeniably good that their whispers seem petty and cruel. And by giving you a public victory that proves your will is your own." The opportunity presented itself 3 nights later. A frantic messenger arrived at the Alpha House just after midnight. It was a shepherd from the northern meadows, his clothes torn, face pale with terror.
"Alpha! Luna! The river! The swift water! It's turned foul! The sheep that drank from it are dropping dead. The fish are floating belly up. The water, it smells of death and metal."
Swiftwater was the lifeblood of the Northern Territories, providing water for livestock, irrigation, and several smaller pack settlements. Its poisoning was a catastrophe. Kale immediately summoned his captains, including a stony-faced Rorik. Maps were spread across the great table. "It could be an attack," Rorik stated immediately, jabbing a finger at the map. "The Stormcrest pack to the north has always coveted our grazing lands. They poison the river, weaken us, then strike." Other captains murmured in agreement, the old mindset: see a threat, prepare for war. Celine, who had been quietly tracing the river's path on the map, spoke up. "The poison is coming from our land." She pointed to a point of stream, deep within Silverfang territory. "Here, near the old silver mine." Rorik scoffed. "The mine has been closed for decades. There's nothing there." "There is stagnation, rot, forgotten toxins," Celine said, her voice certain. "The recent heavy rains have flooded the old shafts, flushing poisons into the groundwater that feeds the swift water. This is not an attack. It is a consequence of our own past neglect." The room was divided. The older warriors sided with Rorik, itching for a foreign enemy to fight. The younger ones looked to Celine, trusting her strange sight. Kale felt the split in his pack like a physical crack. He looked from Rorik's defiant glare to Celine's calm certainty. This was the test. Would he follow the old path of paranoia and conflict, or the new path of responsibility and insight? "We will investigate both possibilities," Kale announced, his alpha voice leaving no room for argument. "Captain Rorik, take a squadron and scout the northern border with Stormcrest. Look for signs of trespass, of tampering. Be vigilant, but do not provoke. I will lead another group with the Luna Queen to the old mine." Rorik looked furious at being sent on what he clearly thought was a fool's errand, while Kale followed the witch's hunch, but he couldn't refuse a direct order. "As you command, Alpha," he said, the words dripping with contempt. The journey to the old mine was grim. The land grew barren, scarred by the industry of a bygone era. The entrance to the mine was a black maw in the hillside, timbers rotten, the air smelling of damp earth and something acrid. Celine approached the collapsed entrance, her silver glow intensifying, pushing back the darkness. She placed her hands on the wet rock, closing her eyes. Kale felt the powerful surge of her senses extending into the earth through layers of stone and stagnant water. "Here," Celine said, her voice echoing strangely. "The main shaft is flooded. The water is heavy with silver residue, yes, but something else. A bitter root, wolfsbane, grew here in abundance once. Its remnants have decayed in the flooded dark, creating a venom that mixes with the metals. This is the poison." Healer Anya, who had accompanied them, nodded grimly.
Wolfsbane tincture is deadly. In this concentrated, slow-leaching form, it would explain the sickness. Can you cleanse it? Kale asked Celine. Her eyes opened, their glow fierce. I can neutralize the poison at its source, but it will require all my strength, and it will take time. The water will be pure by dawn if I begin now. Do it, Kale said without hesitation. While Celine knelt at the mine entrance, her hands flat on the ground, silver light pouring from her into the earth like liquid moonlight, Kale organized the pack. He sent runners to warn all settlements to avoid the river. He organized teams to dig diversion channels from clean springs. He worked alongside the warriors, his alpha title forgotten in the mud and urgency, directing, hauling, solving problems. As the night wore on, a remarkable thing happened. The warriors who had come with him, some of whom had harbored doubts, saw their alpha laboring like a commoner for the pack's safety. They saw their Luna Queen motionless as a statue, channeling impossible power into the ground, her glow slowly dimming with strain. This wasn't a witch's spell. It was a sacrifice of energy, a tangible act of protection. Back at the northern border, Rorik found nothing. No tracks, no scent of Stormcrest wolves, no evidence of tampering. His mission, meant to validate the old ways, had proven them paranoid and voidong. Dawn broke, pale and clean. Celine finally swayed, the light around her guttering out. Kale was at her side in an instant, catching her as she slumped. She was ice cold, exhausted. "It is done," Celine whispered, her voice thin. "The poison is broken. The water will clear in a few hours." At that moment, a scout from the northern meadows came running, his face alight. "Alpha, the river, the color is returning, the death smell is fading." A cheer went up among the weary wolves. They had averted a disaster, not by going to war, but by understanding, by hard work, and by their queen's draining, benevolent power. Kale helped Celine to her feet, holding her close, letting his warmth seep into her. He turned to face the gathered wolves, mud-spattered and tired, but united by a shared victory. The threat came not from an enemy, but from our own forgotten past. We faced it not with claws, but with wisdom and sweat. The Luna Queen's sight saved our herds and our homes. My orders, given with a clear mind, organized our response. This is the new strength of Silverfang, not just the strength to fight, but the strength to see, to heal, and to build. The wolves roared their approval, the sound shaking the dew from the grass. The doubt in their eyes had been replaced by respect for both of them. When Rorik and his squadron returned, empty-handed and sullen, they were met not with sympathy for their failed vigil, but with the palpable triumph of the mine group. The poisoned well of rumors had, for now, been capped by the clear, fresh water of a real, undeniable victory. Kale had proven his leadership was his own. Celine had proven her power was for protection, and the pack had seen it with their own eyes. But as Kale helped a weary Celine back towards home, Rorik's defeat would only make him more desperate. The next attack wouldn't be with whispers or poison. It would be something far more direct. The peace, hard won under the dawn's light, was fragile. The storm was still gathering. The victory at the mine solidified Celine's place in the hearts of the common pack members, but it fermented the resentment in its darkest corners. Rorik's failure was a public humiliation, and a wolf like him had only two choices: submit or escalate. He chose the latter. Kale felt the schist in the pack bonds like a change in barometric pressure, a gathering tension, a focused point of malice aimed squarely at the Alpha House. His patrols reported nothing amiss, but the silence itself was suspicious. It was Celine, with her divine perception, who put a name to the unease. "They are planning something," she said one evening, her gaze distant, as if listening to a frequency only she could hear. Not an open challenge, something underhanded, designed to separate us, to make you choose between me and the pack. A cold dread settled in Kale's stomach. How do we fight shadows? We shine a light.
Celine replied, but her usual confidence was tinged with worry. But we must be ready for when they strike. The strike came during the run of the first snow, a traditional pack hunt to stalk the winter lotters. It was a time of celebration and unity, a perfect backdrop for sabotage.
The plan was large, involving most of the pack splitting into hunting parties. Kale, as alpha, would lead the main group toward the deep woods where the largest elk herds migrated. Celine, at healer Anya's request, agreed to lead a smaller, safer foraging party with the older wolves and younger pups to gather medicinal herbs and late berries in the sun-dappled southern valleys. It was a sensible division of labor, but it also conveniently separated the alpha and his Luna. The hunt began at dawn. Kale's party moved with practiced stealth into the ancient forest. The air was crisp, the world hushed under a blanket of fresh snow. But his wolf was restless, his instincts prickling. Something was off. The usual animal signs were scarce, the forest too quiet. 2 hours in, disaster struck, not from an enemy, but from the land itself. A deep, thunderous crack echoed through the woods, followed by the roar of falling snow, an avalanche, not a natural one. Kale saw the disturbed tree line, the evidence of recent deliberate undermining of a snow cornice his party was about to enter. "Ambush! Back!" he roared, his alpha command blasting through the panic. But it was too late for the vanguard. A wall of white death slammed down, swallowing 5 of his best warriors, including his loyal beta, Jarek. The rest of the party was thrown into chaos, scattered by the tidal wave of snow. Kale fought his way to the front, digging desperately with his hands and the help of others. They pulled 3 warriors out, battered but alive. Jarek and another, a young warrior named Fen, were buried deep. As Kale dug, his mind raced. This was no accident. The avalanche had been triggered. To kill him? To cripple the hunt? To discredit his leadership by causing a disaster on his watch? Then a chilling howl cut through the frantic shouts. It was the emergency signal from the southern valleys, Celine's group. His blood turned to ice. This was the gambit. Separate them, strike at both, force him to choose which crisis to respond to, leave his trapped men to save his mate, or abandon Celine to save his warriors. Either choice would shatter his authority and prove him unfit to lead. For a moment, pure, primal terror for Celine gripped him. He saw her, surrounded by elders and pups, facing an unknown threat. His mate bond screamed at him to go. But he looked at the frantic digging, at the pale, terrified faces of his warriors waiting for their alpha to lead. He was responsible for all of them. "Caleb, take 10 wolves and run. Follow that signal, protect the Luna with your lives," he barked at a steady-eyed lieutenant. "The rest of you, with me. Dig. They are still alive." He made the choice of an alpha. He trusted his mate to hold on, and he trusted his warriors to reach her. He stayed with the buried, his own hands bleeding as he tore at the frozen cascade, his heart a war drum of fear and fury. Meanwhile, in the sunlit valley, Celine's foraging party had walked into a trap of a different kind. They were surrounded, not by rival wolves, but by a snarling, slavering pack of feral, oversized wolverines, creatures normally solitary and reclusive, now acting with a coordinated, unnatural aggression. Their eyes held a strange, milky film. They had been driven here, herded, and likely drugged with something to enrage them. The elders and pups screamed, huddling together. Celine stepped in front of them, her silver glow flaring. "Stay behind me." A wolverine, the size of a bear cub, charged. Celine didn't flinch. She raised her hand, not in attack, but in command. A pulse of pure, calming lunar energy washed over the beast. It skidded to a halt, shaking its head, the milky haze in its eyes clearing momentarily, replaced by confusion. It backed away, whimpering. But there were a dozen more. She couldn't pacify them all at once while protecting the group. One lunged at a cowering elder. Celine moved with preternatural speed, placing herself in the path. She took the blow on her arm, teeth ripping through her sleeve, but her divine flesh resisted the worst of it. She channeled energy into a stunning push, sending the creature tumbling. She was holding the line, but it was a draining, defensive battle. She couldn't unleash her full power without risking the very people she protected. Where were the border patrols? Why had no warning come? Back at the avalanche site, after what felt like an eternity, they pulled a barely conscious Jarek from the snow. Moments later, they found Fen, alive but with a broken leg. The moment the last wolf was clear, Kale didn't wait. Jarek, you're in command. Get them home. And then he shifted. His powerful gray wolf exploded from his human form, and he shot through the trees like a vengeance-driven ghost, following the fading scent of Caleb's group and the distant echoes of snarls. He arrived in the valley to a scene of controlled chaos. Celine stood like a silver bulwark before the huddled group, her dress torn, blood on her arm, facing down the last few confused wolverines. Caleb's warriors had arrived and were finishing driving the beasts off with torches and snarls. The moment Kale's wolf burst into the clearing, the remaining creatures, sensing the arrival of a dominant alpha, finally scattered into the woods. Kale shifted back, not even feeling the cold, and ran to Celine. He grabbed her shoulders, his eyes scanning for injuries. "Are you hurt? What happened?" She said, breathless but calm. Her glow was dim, her energy spent. "They were driven here, doped, meant to keep me busy, to endanger the vulnerable, to pull you away." Kale's rage was a cold, sharp thing. They triggered an avalanche. Jarek and Fen were buried. Celine's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Then understanding dawned. A twin strike, to force a choice, to break you no matter what you chose. Caleb approached, his face grim. "Alpha, Luna, we found this, tucked in a tree near where the wolverines came from." He held out a small, empty leather pouch. It reeked of a pungent, stimulating herb used by hunters to flush game and by trappers to enrage animals. But more importantly, etched faintly on the leather was a symbol, a stylized closed fist, the personal mark of Captain Rorik. The evidence was circumstantial, but damning. The location of the sabotage, the knowledge of patrol routes, the access to hunting supplies, the mark of a proud warrior too stupid to believe he'd be caught. Kale took the pouch, his hand trembling not from fatigue, but from a fury so profound it was quiet. He looked at Celine, at the frantic elders and pups, and thought of Jarek coughing up snow back in the forest. "Gather everyone," Kale said, his voice deadly calm. "Now." The journey back was somber. The triumphant hunt had turned into a march of the betrayed. Word of both attacks spread through the returning parties, weaving together into a single, ugly story of treachery. When they arrived, the entire pack was already gathering in the main square, drawn by the grim energy. Jarek, bandaged and pale, stood supported by two warriors. Fen was on a litter. Celine's torn sleeve and bloody arm were visible to all. Kale walked to the center of the square, Celine by his side. He didn't shout. He held up the leather pouch. Today, on the run of the first snow, 2 attacks were launched against the Silverfang pack. One, an avalanche triggered to bury my warriors in the northern pass. The other, a pack of enraged wolverines driven into our southern foraging party, which included our elders and our pups.
These were not accidents. They were coordinated. They were meant to force me to choose between my trapped warriors and my threatened mate. They were meant to break this pack's spirit and destroy your faith in your leaders. Kale's eyes swept the crowd, landing like stones on Rorik, who stood with his arms crossed, face unreadable. They were an act of treason. He tossed the pouch at Rorik's feet. "This was found at the site of the Wolverine attack. It bears your mark, Captain." The square erupted. Gasps, shouts of denial from Rorik's allies, cries of anger from the families of the attacked.
Rorik stared at the pouch, then up at Kale, his face twisting in defiant rage. A plant, a false flag. You and your witch want to purge the old guard, and you fabricate evidence. You question your alpha's honor? Kale's voice dropped, a predator's growl lacing words. The alpha aura rolled off him, a physical pressure. I question the judgment of an alpha led by the nose by a supernatural creature, Rorik bellowed, pointing at Celine. She is the discord. Since her return, we have been weakened, divided, focused on coddling instead of conquering. I acted to save this pack from her, and from you. It was a confession wrapped in a justification. The truth was out. Before Kale could move, Celine steps forward. She looked at Rorik, her glowing eyes holding not anger, but a profound, weary sadness. You call me a creature. You call caring for the sick and the young coddling. You tried to murder your own pack members to prove a point about strength. She shook her head. You have not saved the pack, Rorik. You have poisoned its very soul. She turned to the pack. The law is clear. Attempted murder of pack members is punishable by exile or death. The alpha will decide your fate. Every eye turned to Kale. This was his moment, his judgment. Would he be the brutal son of Brahm or the just mate of Celine? Kale looked at the wounded, at the terrified pups, at Celine's weary face, and finally at Rorik, a once loyal captain warped by pride and hate. Rorik, son of Gareth, Kale announced, his voice echoing in the hushed square. You are stripped of your rank, your titles, and your place in the Silverfang pack. You are exiled. You have until sunset to gather your personal effects and leave our territory. If you are ever seen within our borders again, the sentence will be death. It was mercy. Brutal, lonely, but mercy. Death would have been easier. Exile was a living death for a pack wolf. Rorik's defiance crumbled into stunned horror. Exile. To be a lone wolf, a rogue, without kin or territory. It was a fate worse than death for one so proud. He looked at his allies, but they all looked away. His gambit had failed, and he had fallen alone. As warriors moved to escort the broken man away, Kale addressed the pack again. Let this be a lesson. Our strength is not in clinging to a cruel past. It is in protecting each other, in unity. The next wolf who raises a hand or plots against their own will find no mercy. The old ways of division are dead. We are one pack. Now tend to the wounded, care for each other. The hunt is over. The healing begins. As the crowd dispersed, the pack bonds, which had been frayed and tense, began to slowly, tentatively knit back together, stronger now, having survived the poison within. The traitor was gone. The Alpha and Luna stood united, and for the first time, the future of Silverfang felt not just hopeful, but secure. Rorik's exile purged the immediate poison from Silverfang, but it also sent ripples far beyond their borders. The story of the returned Luna Queen, the reformed pack, and the exiled war captain spread through the whispering networks that connected the werewolf territories. To some, it was a fascinating curiosity. To others, a dangerous heresy. The summons came a moon cycle later, borne by a stern-faced emissary from the Grey Rock Pack, the largest and most traditionalist in the region. It was an invitation, written on vellum, sealed with wax, worded with polite formality, but the intent was clear. A command. The Council of Northern Alphas requests the presence of Alpha Kale of Silverfang and his companion, Celine, at the Gathering Stones to discuss matters of regional tradition and stability. It's a tribunal, Kale said flatly, dropping the scroll onto their table. They mean to put you, on trial. Rorik's allies must have spread their version of events. They'll call you a witch, a disruptor. They'll say I'm bewitched or weak. Celine studied the summons, her luminous eyes thoughtful. They fear what they don't understand. A Luna Queen upends their entire worldview. A pack that cares for the weak challenges their notion of strength. We don't have to go, Kale said, a protective growl in his voice. We are sovereign in our territory. If we refuse, they will declare us rogues in spirit. They could sanction us, blockade trade, even rally for a cleansing war. We must go. We must face them. Not to beg, but to show them. Show them what? That you can turn them to dust with a thought? Kale asked, half joking. No, she said, a small, determined smile on her lips. To show them a different kind of alpha and a different kind of queen. The gathering stones were an ancient neutral site, a circle of monolithic rocks in a high, wind-swept valley between territories. When Kale and Celine arrived with the small honor guard, the other alphas were already there. There were 5 of them, each a picture of traditional might. Thorn of Grey Rock, massive and grizzled, his aura of blunt force. Lysandra of Stormcrest, sharp-eyed and calculating. Borin of Ironwood, young but fiercely conservative. The others from smaller packs watched like hawks. Their companions, head warriors, elders, formed a grim, silent semicircle. The air was thick with dominance, suspicion, and unasked questions. All eyes went first to Kale, assessing, and then with unconcealed astonishment and unease to Celine. Her silver-streaked hair, her glowing eyes, the subtle aura of power that clung to her. She was utterly alien in this council of hardened warriors. Alpha Thorn spoke first, his voice a gravelly rumble. Kale, you honor the summons, and you bring the one they speak of, the one who came back. This is Celine, Kale said firmly, placing a subtle emphasis on her name. My Luna, my mate. A ripple of displeasure went through the council. Luna, Lysandra of Stormcrest repeated, the word dripping with skepticism. A title from children's tales. We have heard strange stories, Kale, that you exile loyal warriors on the word of this female, that you neglect border strength for infirmaries. The stories are true, Kale said, not denying it. I exiled a traitor who attempted to murder my pack members, and we build infirmaries because a pack whose young and old die of preventable illness is not strong, but stupid. Borin of Ironwood snorted. You sound like her. He jerked his chin at Celine. They say she whispers in your ear, clouds your minds with moon magic.
Celine had remained silent, observing. Now she took a single, graceful step forward. She didn't speak to Borin. She looked at Thorn, the eldest, the leader of the council. Alpha Thorn, she said, her voice clear and melodious, carrying without effort. How was your daughter? Thorn blinked, thrown off guard. My daughter is well. What business is it of yours? The wasting cough she had last winter, the one your healers struggled with. It lingers in the damp, does it not? And the lower rooms of your stone keep. Thorn's eyes widened slightly. It was not common knowledge. It bothers her some nights, he admitted grudgingly. It is a mold, similar to what sickened my own pack, growing in the old mortar. It can be cleared with a paste of sunlight moss and vinegar. The recipe is simple. I will give it to your healer. She turned to Lysandra. Alpha Lysandra, your western hunting grounds. The elk are scarce this year, not because of overhunting, but because the wild pepper vine has overgrown the clearings. It is toxic to them in large quantities. Controlled burns in the late autumn will restore the balance. Lysandra stared, her calculating look replaced by one of shock. The pepper vine blight was a recent, closely guarded concern. She looked at each alpha in turn, offering not threats but insights, a sustainable fishing technique for a pack with struggling rivers, a warning about a weak point in a border cliff prone to collapse, small, precise pieces of knowledge, things she could not possibly know through normal means, each one addressing a quiet worry. She wasn't displaying overwhelming power, she was displaying sight, profound, pack-specific, useful sight.
What trick is this? Boren demanded, though he sounded less sure. Spies? Divination? It is the gift of the Luna, Celine said, finally addressing them all. To see the pack as a whole, its people, its land, its hidden sicknesses and its quiet strengths. My moon magic, as you call it, healed our poisoned river. It saved children from fever. It sees truths that pride obscures. I do not cloud Kale's mind, I inform it, just as he tempers my insight with the practical strength of an alpha. This is the balance our ancestors knew, the balance that made packs truly great. She turned her glowing gaze on the silent, watching warriors and elders behind the alphas. How many of you have lost a child to a winter fever that felt unnatural? How many have seen good land go barren for no reason? How many have watched your alphas make war over resources while your own pups went hungry? The old way, strength alone, suspicion alone, is a path that leads only to cycles of violence and hidden rot. Her words were striking a chord. The alphas were proud, but their companions were the ones who lived with the consequences of their decisions. Alpha Thorn studied her for a long, heavy moment. You speak pretty words, Celine, but the world is not pretty. Strength does keep borders safe. Tradition does hold packs together. Does it? Kale spoke up, stepping to stand shoulder to shoulder with Celine. My father, Alpha Brahm, clung to strength and tradition. He murdered a child on an altar because tradition provided a convenient, brutal answer. That is where the pure old way leads, to the sacrifice of the innocent to avoid hard work. Silverfang is stronger now than it has been in decades, not because we have more warriors, but because every wolf knows they are valued, because we solve problems instead of hiding them, because we have a queen who sees and an alpha who listens. The challenge hung in the cold mountain air. Kale was not defending himself, he was offering a new paradigm. Lysandra was the first to break the stalemate. The pepper vine? She said, slowly, looking at Celine. I am certain as the sunrise, Celine replied. Lysandra gave a curt nod. I will have it looked into. It wasn't acceptance, but it was a crack in the wall of rejection. One by one, the other alphas began to ask hesitant questions, not about politics or power, but about blights on their crops, strange illnesses, failing game trails. Celine answered not with boasts, but with simple, actionable knowledge. She was not a witch to be feared, but a resource to be consulted. The tribunal had turned into a council of a different kind. The alphas weren't kneeling to a queen, but they were listening. The legend of the Luna Queen was no longer just a Silverfang story. It was becoming a regional reality. As they prepared to leave, Alpha Thorn approached Kale. Your father was a hard wolf, but the old alpha rumbled. But you are something else, softer, perhaps too soft for the world. Kale met his gaze. The world has had enough of hard wolves, Thorn. Perhaps it's time for wise ones. Thorn grunted, a non-committal sound, but his eyes held a flicker of something like respect. He glanced at Celine, who was speaking softly with Boren's healer. Keep your Luna close, Kale. The world may not be ready for her, but I suspect it needs her more than it knows. The journey back to Silverfang was quiet, but the silence was one of triumph, not tension. They had faced the old world and not been broken by it. They had planted seeds. They will not change overnight, Celine said, leaning against Kale as their wolves loped through the twilight. No, Kale agreed, but they listened. And for now, that is enough. The story of the Luna Queen is no longer just ours, it's begun. Winter's grip tightened on Silverfang territory, but a new warmth had taken root in the pack's heart. The confrontation at the council and the exile of Rorik had solidified Kale and Celine's authority. Now came the true work, building the future they had promised. The centerpiece was the first law, the one Celine had dreamed of since her return. It had a simple working title, the law of foundational worth. Its principle was revolutionary in its simplicity. No wolf's value to the pack shall be determined by their rank, lineage, or perceived usefulness at birth. Every pup is born with inherent worth, entitled to food, shelter, education, and protection. Drafting it was one thing. Passing it through what remained of the Elder Council was another. The council had been reformed to include Healer Anya, a respected Omega elder named Ilara. Celine had insisted on the name, a tribute and a reclamation, and 2 younger warriors known for their fairness. But old habits died hard. It will make wolves lazy, argued one of the remaining traditionalist elders, a man named Goran. Why work for the pack if you are guaranteed everything from birth? Does a pup work for its mother's milk? Celine asked calmly from her seat beside Kale. We provide for our young because they are the pack. This law merely extends that natural care to ensure no pup falls through the cracks, as I did. It ensures they are strong, educated, and loyal when they do contribute. The cost, Goran persisted. Food, teachers, housing, it will drain our resources. Kale leaned forward. And what is the cost of a wasted life, Elder Goran? The cost of a strong potential warrior who never grew to strength because he was starved as a pup. The cost of a clever mind lost to ignorance. The cost, his voice dropped, of a child sacrificed because she was deemed a resource drain. This law is an investment. The strongest pack is the one that nurtures all its potential. The debate raged for days. Celine used her gift not to compel, but to illuminate. When Goran argued about weakness, she had a young Omega apprentice, a boy whose hands trembled but who had an incredible memory for herb lore, recite complex healing recipes flawlessly. Is this weakness or a different kind of strength we have been blind to?
She brought in the mothers from the poorer cabins who spoke through tears of their fear each winter, of choosing which child ate fully. She brought in warriors who confessed they learned to fight not just to protect, but to escape the hunger of their own childhoods. The law was not just text, it was accompanied by a concrete plan. The old servants' hall was already being transformed into a proper dormitory and schoolhouse, the haven, they called it. Healer Anya and the new Omega elder would oversee it. Pups would spend part of their day there, learning numbers, history, and pack law, regardless of their parents' status. Finally, the day of the vote arrived. The entire pack was allowed to witness in the great hall. The air was thick with anticipation. Elder Goran, seeing the tide of sentiment turning, made one last desperate argument. Alpha, Luna, this law makes us unique. It makes us different. It will make other packs see us as strange, vulnerable. They may attack what they do not understand. Before Kale or Celine could answer, a voice rang out from the crowd. It was Jarek, Kale's beta, still leaning on a cane from his avalanche injuries. With respect, Elder, Jarek said, his voice strong. Let them see. Let them see our pups well-fed and learning. Let them see our elders cared for. Let them see that our strength comes from here. He thumped his fist over his heart. If they attack Bat, then they reveal themselves as enemies of life itself. And I, for one, will fight for this new strength with more fury than I ever fought for the old. A roar of approval shook the hall. Jarek's words, from a scarred veteran, were worth more than 100 philosophical debates. The council voted. The law of foundational worth passed, with only Goran dissenting. It was a victory, sweet and profound, but Celine knew laws on parchment were meaningless without a soul to give them life. That soul arrived in the form of a tiny, crying bundle. A week after the law passed, a young, terrified Omega girl was found at the border, barely more than a child herself, clutching a newborn pup. She was from a neighboring pack that still practiced the abandonment of defective offspring. Her pup had been born with a malformed foot, a weakness her birth pack would not tolerate. She had fled to save him.
The border guards brought them to the Alpha House. The young mother, named Nia, knelt trembling, clutching her silent, wide-eyed son. "Please," she sobbed, "don't send us back. They'll leave him on a hillside. I heard you have a Luna who heals, who cares." Celine knelt before her, ignoring the dirt and tears. "What is his name?" He has no name yet," whispered Mia. "I was afraid to name him." Celine gently took the pup. She examined the tiny, twisted foot. Then she looked at Nia. "Every life has inherent worth. That is our first law. His foot does not change his worth." She placed her hand over the pup's small foot. A soft silver light enveloped it. There was no dramatic crackling, just a gentle reshaping, a guiding of growth that should have happened in the womb. When the light faded, the foot was whole, perfect, and the pup let out a healthy, indignant wail. Nia stared, then crumpled into tears of relief, gathering her now squirming son. "He needs a name," Cale said, his voice rough with emotion. Nia looked up at Celine, then at Cale, her eyes filled with a hope so bright it hurt to see. "Corbin, it means raven, a symbol of a new beginning." Celine helped her up. "Nia and Corbin are under the protection of Silverfang. They will have a home in the haven. Nia, you will learn a trade if you wish. Your son will grow up strong, and he will know his mother is a heroine." The story of Nia and Corbin became the living testament to the first law. It wasn't an abstract idea anymore. It was a mother's tears of joy, a pup's healthy cry, a second chance given. One evening, Celine found Cale at the site of the nearly finished haven, watching as pups, the formerly neglected orphans of the pack, played a raucous game in the snow with the children of warriors and crafters. There was no hierarchy in their play, just joy. "This is it," Cale said softly, taking her hand. The mate bond hummed with shared contentment. "This is what we fought for. This sight." Celine leaned her head against his shoulder, watching the children. "This is only the beginning, Cale, the foundation. There's so much more to build, alliances to nurture, other packs to gently influence, this new balance to protect." "I know," he said, pressing a kiss to her silver-streaked hair, "and we will build it, together. One law, one life, one happy pup at a time." He looked down at her, his stormy gray eyes clear and full of a love that had survived death itself. "Do you remember what you said to me on the mountain when you returned, that I had proven I understood that strength was for protecting the vulnerable?" She nodded, smiling. "You were right," he said, "but you showed me that the greatest strength isn't just in protection, it's in creation. You didn't just come back to judge the past, Celine. You came back to build the future, and watching you do it, it's the honor of my life." In the fading winter light, with the sound of children's laughter ringing in the air, the Luna Queen and her Alpha stood watch over the world they were creating. The past was a scar, but the future was a promise, growing stronger with every passing day, built on a foundation of inherent worth, unwavering love, and a law that declared once and for all, nobody is expendable, everybody belongs. The peace nurtured by the first law was deep, but as they were learning, never permanent. The seeds of change sown in Silverfang had taken root, but in other soils, they produced not flowers, but thorns. The threat came from the north, from the very pack whose alpha had listened most skeptically at the council, Borin of the Ironwood pack. Borin was young, insecure, and ruled by a cadre of old warriors who saw Silverfang's new ways as a disease, a weakness that, if left unchecked, would infect the entire region and make them prey to human incursion or rival shifter clans. Borin's excuse for aggression was flimsy but politically useful, a border dispute over a strip of rugged, pine-covered hills that had been neutral territory for generations. Ironwood scouts began to harass Silverfang patrols. Then a group of Silverfang hunters were ambushed and roughed up, their game stolen. The message was clear. The new, soft Silverfang could be pushed. Kale received the reports with a grim face. The warrior in him, son of Brahm, wanted to muster the pack and meet force with overwhelming force. But the mate of Selene, the alpha of the new way, hesitated. "It's a provocation," Selene said, studying the map of the disputed hills. "Borin wants a war, not to gain a few miles of forest, but to prove a point, to prove that mercy is weakness, that our way leads to defeat. If we respond with traditional aggression, we play into his story." "So we let them steal from us, attack our people?" Kale growled, frustration evident. "No," Selene said, her eyes glowing with strategic light. "We respond, but not the way he expects. We fight for that territory, but not with claws. We fight for it with presence." Her plan was audacious. Instead of sending warriors, she proposed sending builders and healers and teachers. "We will go to the disputed hills. We will not post guards. We will build a small outpost, a healing station, a hunting lodge open to any pack in need. We will tend the forest, clear old traps, plant restorative herbs. We will make that land more valuable through care than it could ever be through possession. We will claim it by improving it for everyone." Kale stared at her. "They'll see it as an invasion, a colonization of their claims land with kindness." "Exactly," Selene said. "Let them. What will they attack? Healers mixing poultices? Carpenters building a shelter? If Borin strikes that, he reveals himself not as a strong alpha protecting his borders, but as a brute attacking the helpless. He loses the moral ground completely, even in the eyes of his own traditionalist allies." It was a gamble of the highest order. Kale felt the risk in his bones, but he trusted Selene's sight, her understanding of the deeper currents. They put the plan into motion. A mixed group of 30 wolves, healers, builders, a few senior warriors for basic protection, journeyed to the disputed hills. They called it the Way Station. They built not a fort, but a large, sturdy lodge with a prominent healing symbol carved over the door. They cleared a poisoned spring Selene had sensed, making clean water available. They even built a small playground. The Ironwood pack watched, first with confusion, then with mounting fury. Borin sent scouts to intimidate them, to demand they leave. The Silverfang workers simply offered them water, asked after their families, and continued their work. Finally, Borin's patience snapped. He arrived at the edge of the clearing with 50 of his best warriors, fully shifted.
"We build a haven," Kale called back, his voice steady, "for any traveler of any pack, caught in a storm or in need of healing. The land benefits. All packs benefit. Where is the insult in that?" "The insult is in your weakness," Borin snarled. "You defile the wild with your softness. Leave now or we will burn it to the ground and send you back to your alpha in pieces." The Ironwood warriors advanced a step, growls rumbling like thunder. Selene stepped forward, just ahead of Kale. She didn't flare her power. She simply looked at Borin's enraged wolf and then past him at his warriors. She reached out with her senses, not to attack, but to feel. She felt their aggression, yes, but underneath she felt something else. The anxiety of fathers wondering if this fight was honorable. The discomfort of wolves who had been told they were defending their home, but now were facing healer women and carpenters. "Warriors of Ironwood," she said, her voice carrying a lunar calm that somehow cut through the tension. "Look around you. What do you see? A threat or a gift? We have cleared a blight from your forest. We have made clean water flow. We offer shelter to your hunters caught in blizzards. Is this what you were born to destroy? Is this the legacy of your strength?" Some of the advancing wolves hesitated, their growls faltering. They looked at the well-built lodge, the clean spring, the innocent playground. Borin saw the hesitation and it enraged him further.
She bewitches you! Do not listen to the witch!" He gathered himself to lunge, aiming not at Kale but directly at Celine. It was the moment of truth. Kale moved to intercept, but Celine was faster. She didn't raise a hand, she didn't summon a blast of light. She simply looked at Boren as he charged, and she spoke a single word, infused not with command to obey, but with a command to see. Boren. It was his name, but in her voice, with her power behind it, it became a key. It unlocked the door to his own hidden heart. The charging alpha wolf skidded to a halt just feet from her, as if he'd hit an invisible wall. He didn't see Celine anymore. In his mind's eye, triggered by her divine compulsion to perceive truth, he saw something else. He saw his own father, the previous Ironwood Alpha, a cruel and petty man who had berated young Boren for showing mercy to an injured fox. He heard his father's voice. "Sentiment is for prey. We are wolves." He felt the weight of the expectations he'd carried, the fear that he was not hard enough, not cruel enough to be a true alpha. He saw that this entire conflict, this posturing, was not about land, but about proving to his father's ghost and to his own doubts that he was not weak. The vision lasted only a second, but it broke his momentum completely. He shifted back to human form, staggering, his face pale with shock and sudden awful clarity. He looked at Celine, really looked at her, and saw not a witch, but a mirror reflecting his own deepest fear. He looked at his warriors who were watching their alpha's sudden transformation with confusion. He looked at the peaceful, useful outpost he had come to destroy. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a hollow shame. He had been ready to start a war, to kill and die, to prove he wasn't something he secretly feared he was, and the person he had wanted to destroy had just shown him the truth without raising a finger in violence. What are you?" Boren whispered, his voice broken. "I am the one who sees," Celine replied softly so only he and Kale could hear. "The question, Alpha Boren, is not what I am, it is who you want to be. The shadow of your father, or the alpha of your own making?" Boren stood there, trembling in the center of the clearing. The silence was absolute. Then he turned to his warriors. "Stand down," he said, the order quiet but final. We are leaving." "Alpha?" his head captain asked, bewildered. "This is not our fight," Boren said, his voice gaining a shred of his old strength but directed differently. "This is not weakness. It is something else, and it is not a threat to Ironwood." He looked back at Kale and Celine, a complex war of emotions on his face. Defeat, awe, and the first glimmer of something like respect. "The land, the way station, it may stay, as a neutral ground, for all packs." Without another word, he turned and walked back into the forest. His warriors, after a moment of stunned hesitation, followed him, the fight gone out of them. The crisis was over, not with a battle, but with a revelation, not with bloodshed, but with a brutally honest mirror held up to a rival's soul. As the Ironwood wolves disappeared into the trees, Kale let out a long breath he didn't know he'd been holding. He looked at Celine. "What did you show him?" "Himself," she said simply, her glow dimming slightly from the effort. "Sometimes the fiercest enemy is the one inside. I just helped him see it before he made a terrible mistake." The news of the stand-down spread like lightning. The story wasn't Silverfang defeated Ironwood. It was the Luna Queen stopped a war with a word. It was more powerful than any military victory. It showed a strength beyond physical conflict. That night, at the newly saved way station, Kale held Celine close. "You were right," he murmured into her hair. "We fought for the land with presence, and we won without a single drop of blood being spilled. This is the strength we must champion, Kale. The strength to disarm, to heal, to reveal truth. It is harder than fighting. It requires more courage, but it builds something that lasts." In the north, Boren of Ironwood began, quietly, to ask questions of his own healers, to walk his borders not just looking for threats, but for blights that needed clearing. The infection of a new idea, born of a moment of shocking self-awareness, had begun in the most unlikely of places. The Luna Queen's way was spreading, one converted heart, one averted war at a time. 15 years is a long time in the life of a pack. It is a generation. For Silverfang, it was a transformation etched not just in law, but in the very landscape and the light in its people's eyes. Celine stood at the edge of the memorial garden that now covered the sacred mountain summit. The altar was gone, its stones used to build the foundation of the haven down in the valley. In its place bloomed moonflowers and silver sage. A simple, beautiful fountain bubbled where she had been bound, and in the center stood the statue, not of a queen, but of a child. Any child, every child, looking forward with hope. The inscription read, "Here, innocence was lost to fear. Here, we vow never again. Every life is a light. Protect the light." A warm hand slipped into hers. Kale. His hair was touched with silver at the temples now, his face lined with smiles and the cares of leadership, but his storm-gray eyes were clear, peaceful. The constant guilt that had haunted them was a faded memory, replaced by the solid daily joy of building a life together. "They're waiting," he said softly.
She smiled and nodded. Together, they walked down the now gentle path to the pack clearing below. The entire pack, over 600 wolves now, for their ways had attracted newcomers seeking peace, was gathered. But today was not about the Alpha or the Luna Queen. Today was about the future. In the center of the clearing stood their daughter, Lyra, 17 years old, with Kael's dark, unruly hair and Celine's glowing blue eyes, though Lyra's glow was a softer, more personal light. She wore the simple white tunic of a Luna in training. Before her knelt a young boy, no more than 12, trembling slightly. He was a recent arrival, an orphan from a pack still clinging to the old, brutal ways. His name was Leo. Lyra placed her hands on Leo's shoulders. He had been struggling to find his wolf, his fear and past trauma blocking the shift. This was her first public test as her mother's heir and apprentice. "You are safe, Leo," Lyra said, her voice calm and sure, echoing her mother's gentle authority. "Your wolf is not a monster. He is your courage. He has been waiting for you to stop being afraid. Let him out." She closed her eyes. A silver light, gentler than Celine's but no less potent, flowed from her hands into the boy. It was a light of encouragement, of unlocking, of permission. Leo gasped. There was a shimmer in the air around him, a struggle, and then, with a sound like a sigh of relief, he shifted. A beautiful, healthy brown wolf pup tumbled onto the grass, then yipped in joyful surprise, wagging his tail furiously. The pack erupted in cheers. It was a small miracle, a repeat of the healing and acceptance that was now Silverfang's hallmark. Lyra helped the wobbly pup shift back, and the beaming, tearful boy was swept up by his new foster family. Celine watched, her heart so full it ached. This was the legacy, not monuments, not conquered territories, but this, a young Luna healer guiding another lost soul home, a cycle of kindness perpetuating itself. The celebration continued with feasting and music. Celine and Kael moved among their people, no longer distant rulers, but beloved elders, parents of the pack. They spoke with the original orphans, now grown into carpenters, teachers, and warriors of a new kind. They laughed with Nia, whose son Corbin was now a strapping, quick-witted young tracker with no trace of a limp. They even shared a respectful nod to Elder Gorin, who, though still crotchety, had devoted his later years to meticulously recording the pack's new history. As twilight painted the sky in shades of violet and gold, Kael and Celine stole away to their favorite spot, a high bluff overlooking the thriving territory. Lights twinkled in the haven, in the new infirmary, in homes that were warm and sturdy. The distant silhouette of the neutral way station was just visible to the north, a symbol of peace. "It's beautiful," Kael said, his arm around her.
It's what we built, together. Do you ever think about it? That night? The mountain? Celine was quiet, watching the first stars appear. Sometimes, not with the old fear. Now it feels like a story that happened to someone else. A sad, dark story that had to be told so this one could begin. She looked up at him, her luminous eyes soft. That frightened little girl, she would be so proud of Lyra and so grateful to the boy who tried to save her. Kyl's throat tightened. He pulled her closer, resting his chin on her silver-streaked hair. He's grateful too, every day, that she came back, that she chose him, that she taught him how to truly live. Below them, in the clearing, Lyra had started a bonfire. Pups and elders alike were dancing, their laughter carried up on the breeze. A new song was being sung, one about light in the darkness, about second chances, about a pack that learned to love itself. Celine took Kyl's hand and placed it on her slightly rounded belly. Their second child, a son they would name Asher, stirred gently within. Another light, another promise. "The story isn't over, you know," she whispered. "I know," Kyle said, a smile in his voice. "It's just getting to the best part." They stood there, the Alpha and the Luna Queen, watching over their legacy, a pack born from a sacrifice, forged in mercy, and now shining as a beacon of hope in a world that was slowly, tentatively beginning to change. The girl they had thrown away had become the queen who remade a world. And she did it not with vengeance, but with a love so strong it healed everything it touched. In the silver moonlight, under a sky full of stars, they turned and walked hand in hand back towards the music, back towards the light, back towards the happy, hopeful, thriving future they had built, together. The end was not an ending, but a gentle, joyful beginning that would last for generations to come.